Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Search Engine Journal webinar. Today, we will be joined by Andreas, founder at Longtail UX, who's going to be talking about how to turn SEO into a measurable revenue generator. Really important conversation and topic. A lot of good information here. I think you're going to really enjoy. If you're wondering who's talking to you, my name is Brent Satoris. I'll be your moderator today. And Andreas, I'm going to let you have a moment to just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into some webinar housekeeping points.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Brent. And yeah, thanks. Welcome, everyone. So I'm Andreas. As Brent says, I'm a co-founder of Longtail UX. And a little bit of background. So I used to work at Google long time ago, actually. That was more on the paid side, but I was working with the engineering team in Mountain View, so and the product team. So I was in working on quality score, for example, the first AdWords editor a long time ago. And then I worked really pretty much everywhere, like client side, large e-commerce, startups, before this one, and also agency side, running an agency over here. And yeah, so that's me.
Awesome. Quick housekeeping points. If during the webinar at any point you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the little webinar question box that's at the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. We will have a couple polls throughout the webinar. Those are our opportunity to kind of take a moment to give a little bit of feedback, to kind of engage a little bit. This information helps us kind of figure out what we should go deeper dive into. It also helps a lot for which questions we're going to use kind of, at the end with the Q&A to make sure we're really giving everybody what they're asking for. As I mentioned, there is a Q&A and it will be at the end of the presentation. You do not have to wait to submit your questions, but please make sure there's some context to your questions. Sometimes people ask questions that are very pointed. What did you mean by that? Well, 30 minutes later, it's kind of hard to tell where that came from. So definitely give some context, but ask your questions all the way throughout, and we will get to those at the end in the Q&A. We'll do our best to link any resources, right? If Andrea says, there's a specific tool or there's some specific article or something, then we will do our best to get a resource link in there so that you can find it. If we miss something, if you have any questions, again, use the question box to let us know. After the webinar, if you don't mind, we have a small survey. It literally only takes 5 minutes or less. It's really important for us because it helps us gauge how we do these webinars and how we kind of evolve them over time. So if you don't mind taking a moment, please take that time to fill out that short survey for us. Lastly, the entire webinar will be recorded and made available to you through a recap post and also, I believe, through the email. Those posts typically come out on Tuesday of the following week. So next week on Tuesday, I think you'll see that come out. Without any further delay, let's dive into the webinar. Andreas, take us away.
All right, thank you. So yeah, let's start. So I'm going to talk today about how to convert SEO from a cost center into a measurable revenue generator, and I'm probably also going to explain what that means. Talked about a bit about my background. Just one fun fact, maybe. It has been said, colleagues of mine, like in the olden days, used always to say to me, "Hey, you should read more SEO blogs." I actually consider that one of my strengths, not to pay too much attention, because yeah, there's just a lot of noise and a lot of opinions, and I much rather prefer to look at data and results. Yeah, so today's webinar, what is this going to be about? It's not going to be for you if you're looking for a list of quick fixes, SEO tips and tricks. There are tons of great webinars also in Search Engine Journal, great articles about that. They're takeaways, but the things I'm going to talk about is more like really bigger themes, which you can apply. Also, if you don't like automation, yeah, I'm going to talk about automation as well, and how to do things at scale. Yeah, and of course, I'm going to talk about things that you can actually action on the website, and because I think this is probably one of the biggest challenges in SEO, or there are many, that a lot of what you do and what you discover and recommendations for on-site SEO, you rely on the tech team, you rely on what your platform can do, and so very often, well, in the old days on the agency side, you come with like 100 recommendations, and after a year, only like a few of them are implemented. So yeah, and measuring and comparing results, that's super important, which is a challenge in SEO. So that's what I'm going to talk about as well. This webinar is definitely for you if you're interested in a different perspective on SEO. If you like to have a bigger impact on your company's success, of course, I guess that's a given anyway. But also if you want to get out of your SEO bubble a little bit and think in other concepts, and not just in terms of rankings and keyword coverage and these things, which are very, very specific to the SEO world. Yeah, so problems I will address is, first of all, how to measure brand versus non-brand SEO revenue. This should actually be something really simple. Let's have just a quick look at paid search. When you spend, let's say you spend $1 million on paid search a month, and you might get $100 million in revenue, right? That's amazing. That's like 100 times ROI. But when you then actually look at the search terms, very often it's a lot of these search terms and a lot of that traffic is from brand keywords, like people searching for your website. They're pretty much too lazy to type in the URL into the browser, so they just type the brand name in. And of course, the ROI for those ads for paid search and the ROI for generic keywords is completely different. And what you actually want to drive is new traffic, right? So you want to look at the ROI for your paid ads for generic keywords. Now it's pretty much the same for SEO. What you're driving is not brand searches, because if you have an established website, you should be showing up on top anyway. I mean, there's definitely certain things you can do, and there's a room for doing brand SEO as well, especially when it comes to reputation management and all of that. But when you think about like e-commerce and when you think about driving revenue, really what you want to focus on is the non-brand, and that's what you want to be measured on and measure yourself, right? Everything else, brand search, is really much driven by TV ads, banners, social, like lots of other channels. All right. So that's a challenge though, because it's all not provided, right? Keyword not provided. So, and then the next thing I want to talk about, how to measure ROI in SEO, and that actually is the same, right? You spend money, and if you spend money in other channels, your CMO or your CFO who decides about budgets in the end, or your CEO, they want to know what the return is. So if you can't really measure the ROI of any investment in SEO, that's a challenge, right? And how you could change this, I'm going to talk about that. Yeah, that's the reason why so much money goes into paid and actually not that much money goes into SEO. So, and why SEO is really much more seen as, in many companies, hey, like we got to do what we got to do, like just like a baseline, but it's not actually like a driver. Hey, let's spend 10 millions more because these are the returns we can measure. And then lastly, how to overcome SEO limitations by your existing system, also usability with your UX team. So that's another challenge. It's not only that you have on-site recommendations from SEO point of view, where you have tech limitations, but sometimes also say, hey, we should change those menus. We should call this category in another way, because then actually that's where we have a better chance to get SEO traffic. And then you get in a fight with the UX teams as well. But that's how we call things, and like we can't just change the navigation, and this will confuse users, because you have SEO, but then you have all these other channels and existing customers as well. So yeah, how you can separate that. And also how that can be a great risk mitigator, right? Because when you touch the overall structure of a site, the overall information architecture, there's upside, but there's also always a risk, especially if you have a large site that already gets a lot of traffic. So I'm going to talk about all these problems. I'm also going to talk about Longtail UX, which is, well, the company I co-founded, and the SEO technology. It's not just SEO technology, actually. We also work across paid and shopping and paid social. But why I'm going to talk about this is not just because we sponsor this, but it's really what Longtail UX does. It's basically it's the system that came out of looking at SEO in a completely new way, like in a completely different way. And I'm going to use this as an example, pretty much. It summarizes a different perspective and also the benefits that you can have for you and your business. It doesn't actually replace any traditional SEO, right? So I think this is important. Yeah, I'm going to make half a political statement here. Of course, it's an important day as well, and so we all know everyone's waiting for the results of the election. But I think it's politics and SEO have something in common, right? I really have a very, very strong belief. I'm very passionate about that you shouldn't play with fears, and it's the same in SEO. Like there's you should think about solutions and you should actually present your solutions. And what happens a lot in SEO is you look, if you do this, like what the other people say, everything's going to be terrible. Like we're all going to die. Well, the website's going to go down, and like there's a lot of that. And I think that's also why I actually don't like to read like SEO blogs too much. Obviously, Search Engine Journal, and there's lots of variable resources, but look at results, look at solutions, and very often they can actually live alongside each other. Talk about here is this doesn't replace link building, it doesn't replace manual content creation, it doesn't replace any of the traditional technical on-site SEO. That's just as important. So all of the other webinars, all of the other advice, well, look at that. Like any of our clients would always say that. If you use Longtail UX, don't forget about everything else. It doesn't replace, it's an additional opportunity. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Before we start, so let's just take a quick look at this. So we also have a free tool, which is good. That's scorecard.longtail.com. And it actually gives you a lot of the insights I'm talking about today. Like there's manual ways to get to those insights. So when I talk about brand, non-brand share of revenue, which you actually can't see directly in Google Analytics, but this is a tool you can use. You can connect it to your Google Analytics, and it actually gives you those insights, and it actually explains to you how it does it too, right? How does Longtail UX calculate brand versus non-brand? You actually have a really nice explanation there as well. So you can do this manually, but this is actually a nice way to do this automatically. The other thing what this tool gives you, it gives you unique insights in keyword opportunities, which is also what I'm going to talk about. So here you see column which says Google monthly search volume. That is Google Keyword Planner data. But then you actually see sessions predicted. And sometimes you say, like, how can you have like 90 searches and all these sessions? Well, that's because many tools are really bad, or most of actually all of the keyword tools out there are really bad at predicting traffic opportunity and giving you data on long tail search volume. Like the moment you go into 3-4 word combinations and longer, you very often get very low numbers, and the reality looks very different. So what we do here is basically we look at the search term report from paid search and basically extrapolate from there. Hey, we see there are sessions because you got them, you've actually paid for them. And this is what it could mean for you for SEO, right? That's again, you can do this manually, but this is also super useful. It gives you that, and then it also shows your additional revenue opportunity if you were to partner with Longtail UX and use our technology. But yeah, right, this is how it works. If you go there, and if you want to do this while I'm going to talk, this is a free tool. Depending on the volume coming in, it might actually take a few days for us to get back with all the insights. But you can actually get also automated very quick insights. It really depends on what the data is. Yeah, so you connect your property view and then you select whether you're e-commerce or not. You have to say what's the main goal you want to track if you're not e-commerce, and of course you have to put in your brand variations, right? In that case, for example, instead of Odor Beauty, just you could type in Adore, and then that basically takes care of that. Right, but okay, let's get into the topic. Why is it that SEO seems to get no respect often outside of SEO? So let's get to the first poll question. I'm going to hand this over for the actual poll. How much of your website traffic comes from SEO?
So how much traffic comes from SEO? Less than 50%, 50 to 70%, more than 70%, or I really don't know. And I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to kind of get your chance to vote in. I can see the results, so I can tell when there's like a statistical analysis or we have enough people voted to kind of give us a sense of the audience. So I'm going to give everybody about another 10, 15 seconds, and then I'll go ahead and close it out and share the results. This is kind of interesting because some people get really excited about a lot of traffic from SEO, and like other people get terrified by it, right? Because they've gone through burns where you've all of a sudden had an update and you have like 90% of your revenue stream is just gone, right? So some people get really nervous about it and some people get really excited. So let me close it and share the results. Yeah, so the biggest chunk is 50 to 70%, not too crazy, it seems kind of reasonable.
All right, thank you. Well, that's actually quite a lot, like 50 to 70% for the average. So that is a lot of like very SEO-driven websites. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing. Right. So, but let's talk about search in as a whole. Again, the political look at both sides. So a third of total digital ad spend worldwide goes to Google. That's insane, right? Like that's actually an absolute insane number. I think once you reach that, well, you probably want to do this like yeah, like Larry Page just retire, because you've basically, wow, this is absolutely crazy. It has gone down a little bit because there's Facebook, but there's just so much money going in there. All right. So that means there's a huge pot of money, but it's actually search. It goes into search ads. All right. So here you have $136 billion per year, and that's 2019 numbers. So that's not going to go down. Goes on into paid search, right? And why? Because it's measurable down to the ROI is measurable down to the keyword level, and there's lots of automation tools as well. You see those shopping ads there. Like most of the budget now goes in there for e-commerce 100%, but even total, like that's one of the most successful ad formats. Although it's actually crazy when you like its user experience is actually not that great. Like you click on it and then it opens a new tab because Google knows you have to go back, and then you only see this one product. You have to go back and forth again, right? There's lots of pogo sticking. That actually, if that was SEO, actually Google doesn't like pogo sticking too much. Anyway, but it's just measurable down to the keyword level. It's so easy. You connect like a product feed, and then you just say how much money you want to spend, pretty much, right? I mean, there's a few steps, but yeah, so much money. What about organic search? All right. There are statistics that say 70% of clicks go to organic. And that's definitely true when you look at brand and non-brand together, right? But even if you ignore brand searches for the specific, like the website brands, there still is a large proportion. And although Google's pushing the SEO results down because there's all these amazing ads on top, right? And there's ever more because they're just so good. But still, like SEO is a lot of traffic, and I always like to compare this with bus advertising. Imagine you do bus advertising, and on the left side, people spend like billions of dollars on the left side of the buses, and the right side of the bus doesn't get anything, right? And it's just because the left side of the bus, how you get there, is like everyone knows how to get there, and can basically, it's like very easy. You can basically pay per view or whatever. On the right side, really people don't actually know how to get on that bus with the advertising. And I think that's one of the problems. Is like historically lack automation, and then really no visibility is definitely not down to the keyword level, and also not short term, right? Ads, simple, right? You pay for an ad, you can measure it tomorrow. Well, actually today live. But on organic search, whatever you do, it actually takes time. Of course, Google, you're not stupid, right? If you could have direct impact, everyone would be testing the algorithm. I would be one of them for sure, but that's just what it is, right? There's a time lag. Right, so yeah, paid search, full transparency, ROI data down to the search query level, not just the keyword, the actual search query. You can actually know what the search query is. Yeah, and very efficient budget decisions. So, yeah, sorry, we hit this here because, well, that's actually real data, but yeah, you can actually see every single search term. Organic search, I would say zero transparency. I mean, there's some kind of, but it's really in Google Analytics, which is the main tool connects to Google, to the same thing, the same company. But 98.8% in this case is keyword not provided, right? You don't see anything. There's no visibility, and then you have like a few keywords there, which you can use. I'm gonna get into that. Yeah, and then you have Google Search Console, where it gives you like really nice, like it gives you impressions, but there's no revenue data. So what is this, right? Why is there no revenue data? Why is it not connected? Because then you get traffic, but it's also only like the actual keywords gives you only the top 1,000, but you have no revenue. So we just talked about ROI. How can you talk about ROI when you don't have revenue? Why is this not connected? This is crazy. Yeah, so quickly, next question. So what percentage of your company's performance-based budget is dedicated to SEO? So think about all the other performance channels, right? Digital performance channels, paid social, and paid search, etc.
So is your answer less than 10%, between 10 and 30%, more than 30%? We have a duplicate up on the C
Oh,
one. So you guys get to vote one or the other, and we'll let's vote on the bottom one on that on the D spot if you're voting for C, because I do see more people are voting there already. So we'll just combine them together. That won't be too hard. I'll give a couple more minutes, not minutes, a couple more seconds. I think we pretty much got it at this point. So let me share this. Between 10 and 30%, and also less than 10% dominated that, for the most part, but less than 10%, which does not surprise me honestly at all.
yeah. Well, I'm quite happy actually, because otherwise I would have been talking. Well, no, but that's what I see. It confirms. I'm quite glad. It really depends on the company, right? I mean, there are some websites they're actually just SEO driven. They don't do any paid search because it doesn't work for them, and they basically cracked like something for SEO. But as you said, it's a massive risk actually. If 90% of your revenue comes from there and you put all your money there, but it's exactly that, right? Like, why do you get less budgets? Um, that's the reason. Like, that's from what I see, and that is exactly the reason. So let's get to the first question. So how to calculate the ROI for SEO? Like, there's the old manual way. Well, but first of all, it's the old question. Or actually also, and this is what still surprises me, in the SEO world, it's almost accepted that you can't. And especially when it comes to agencies and our work there, it's actually something agencies like also, right? Because it's easy. Like, well, it's harder to convince someone, but then it's just the presentation and the beliefs and the trust, but you don't actually have to be measured that much. All right. So I can tell you, like, I worked on an agency side, and the well, we didn't call it SEO, it was called experience, right? So SEO, they try to get away from this. Yeah, it's like it's more than that, and that's one of the most profitable areas in agency land, right? Because it's consulting hours rather than with paid search. Everyone just gets used to just pay like a small percentage on top. So yeah, but I think it's a massive disadvantage over the long term, right? Because you don't get budgets. And obviously from a business perspective. So let's look at the old way. Google Analytics organic search, channel year-on-year comparison. Well, you can do that, but really you have no idea what I said before, like what's brand and what's generic keyword related. And if that was paid search, and if you presented that, I mean, you can still get away in some companies for paid search to combine it, but really, it's very different. Like, it's very different type of users. And yeah, and the revenue increase could come from anything, TV advertising, and well, here of course you see 2020 compared to 2019. There's other there are other reasons of course as well. But what is actually brand, non-brand, even in the uplift, right? With all the changes with COVID, right? You also want to know that actually. Um, Right. You can do the same for Google Search Console, year-on-year comparison. Well, no revenue, no ROI. Stop there. But yes, still, it's a useful tool, of course. But it shows you only a subset. Like, you can't get that many. So we have clients that have easily 500,000 revenue contributing search terms in paid, right? And then you have like a subset there, and you don't even have revenue. So that's tough. Well, then you have SEMrush and other third-party data, which, by the way, I don't want to say anything against them. They're super useful. There's so much data in there. But first of all, it's third-party data, which you always have to, again, that's accepted in SEO. How many times have we gone with like trying, like selling our technology and talking to the teams there and talked about case studies of super successful clients, then they go and say, oh, let me just test this. And then they put our clients' websites in those tools and say, oh, actually, it looks like they've gone down. And then we said, this is insane, because like their Google Analytics, like you see revenue and traffic, everything is going up. So you trust third-party data, you talk to them, right? So it's really like, it's almost accepted that the third-party data is like, how many people do I talk to who work in a company where they rather look at this third-party data than actually looking at their own Google Analytics. Like, Google Analytics is not an SEO's best friend often, all right? But it should be. Same as your Google Ads search term report. They are your first part. Yeah, they're your own data, their own website's data. Anyway, yeah, just when you look at paid search, we compare that across 60 clients, and the paid search spend per month is 5 to 15 times off. And in paid, right? So what do you think happens for SEO? Still, of course, like there's lots of insights there, which are super useful. They have their own databases, and for especially for competitor analysis, like they won't give you access to their GA. But again, there's no revenue and no ROI, right? It tells you traffic costs, and even brand versus non-brand. It's really hard to get it out. Like, why isn't there like a button which tells you, hey, brand search is non-brand? You have to download the whole thing, and then you have to do your own analysis, right? So, but without revenue. Again, we're using SEMrush. I just want to make sure we're actually using them. But for this particular purpose, doesn't help. Yeah, so then what can you actually do? You'd rather count revenue from landing pages. And that's actually an interesting one. You can actually look at even brand versus non-brand to some degree. You can actually look at when your organic search and when you look at landing pages. This is not real data, just want to make sure, right? This is just all mock data. So you could, yeah, you can look at landing pages. I think the one mistake we sometimes make is we assume that only the homepage gets brand traffic in SEO, and that's not true. You can actually test that when you compare. But actually looking at landing pages is a really interesting starting point. The only challenge is here we're only talking about new, like stuff that's new, not your existing changes, right? When you make changes in your website and that affects existing pages, of course that doesn't work. But how does it work if you actually want to talk about new opportunities? First of all, if you create landing pages, it has to address a search need, right? So you do keyword research, how do people search? Hopefully also look at, is this like a transactional keyword? Are people actually searching to purchase, or they're just looking for research? That actually makes a big difference, of course, in conversion rates, what happens then. Then you also have to make sure that it fills a gap in your site navigation or in your site information architecture, because you don't want to create duplicate pages, right? Just for the sake of it, to then track something. Duplicate content, yeah. And then you also want to improve where you don't already rank. So here's the thing: even if you rank position 1 to 5, even with a landing page, that's maybe not ideal. Just creating one targeting the same keyword, which has more related content, you can do that, but you have to be careful how you do that, because again, like you might not actually improve. But then also you want to match actually products, because you can write a blog post and create manual content, like written content about a topic, but your conversion rates actually won't be high, which again, very often is not a problem for SEO because you're looking at rankings and traffic. But when you look at revenue, you need conversion rates, and a blog post just doesn't sell. In the short term, direct ROI, like again, there's a good reason for it. You wanna be more like be shown as knowledgeable in your field. You give advice to your users. It's like the overall, it's a brand thing as well. But when we talk direct ROI, yeah, you want to have products on there or the services you actually sell. And then the next question is, how fast can you actually create 100,000 pages if you wanted to, right? If you have 1 million pages already, like 1 million page, like we're talking about large websites, if you want to do this at scale, there's a challenge, of course. Right. Last 4 questions, I think. So what pain points do you face in making SEO improvements within your business, especially like on-site?
First answer, technical implementation. B, not enough budget. Wow, this is really good. Pain points to face. Number 3, hard to demonstrate. D, lack of understanding in business. Or E, all of the above. What pain points do you face in making SEO improvements? I have seen every single one of these. So that's really, really interesting. All right, let's see. We've got about 50, 60% have voted, so I'm gonna give it just a couple more seconds. The statistics are really close on this, so every vote is changing like the overall numbers, which is always interesting. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close and share now. Looks like we have quite a few that had all of the above, which is really interesting. Normally you find a couple of them, but that's surprising to me that many people are having a struggle on all fronts.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Well, once again, thanks for sharing. And I actually think B, C, and D are sort of similar. because if it's hard to demonstrate ROI, you get a lack of, you don't get enough budgets. But also, if there's a lack of understanding of SEO in the business, it's sometimes because it's so hard to understand the ROI, and then you don't get budget either. So it's yeah, again, so they are connected, and technical limitations, they're always a pain. You have all these great ideas, everything you want to do, but how you actually get it implemented, and it takes years sometimes. Right. So let's look at a new way to address these problems. Right. So I talked about the problems, and I'm going to talk about a few solutions now. So measure brand versus non-brand baseline. So that actually unlocks the real value of organic search that's not related to anything else. Like, it's actually new customers. There's a different way how you can try to do it. I said before, you could look at landing pages and basically look at, okay, your homepage is pretty much your brand search. It underrepresents brand, I can tell you. There's another way how you can do this. You can look at new versus returning customers. That's actually getting closer, which is actually interesting. Returning customers and versus new. It's again in Google Analytics. It's just a different view. On organic search actually gets you closer to the percentages. But for what we realized is the closest you can get, and again, you can use our tool, but you can do this manually, is literally you look at, we're going into the political topic again. You basically, when you do a political poll, right, and we know they can be wrong because people change their mind or they don't tell you the truth. Good news is the data in GA, actually, the poll you do there, just the keywords don't change their mind, or they don't hide their actual opinion. So the 2%, 2-ish% of keyword provided, you can actually take that as a poll on the total population of all the keyword traffic, including not provided. Because when you do a political poll, you don't ask everyone, you actually ask a small percentage of the population. And if you look at a long enough time frame, so I'm talking 12 months here, but sometimes you actually, it can be shorter, you actually get a very accurate picture. And there are statistical tools that tell you how statistically significant and that is, and how high your margin of error is. And so what we've done in our Longtail, in our scorecard, we actually give you all those values. All right, so we take the 2% or 1.8 or 2.3 or whatever it is of keyword provided, look at the ratios there, and extrapolate from them, like what's the percentage of the known keywords revenue, transaction sessions, and then extrapolate onto the full population of all the traffic. And then you see, and the margins of error get really, really small. This is really interesting. So if you don't trust political polls, it's because, as I said, people change their mind, or they might not tell you the truth. And also the pollsters may have an agenda or not. In here, it's that data is just, yeah, none of those problems. And you get very interesting results, and they might surprise you. Right, so once you know that, where do you find your market share from a conceptual point of view? You already have a strong brand with loyal customers, right? So you have brand and brand search, and also like your website. The opportunity is everything around. It's all the generic search, right? It's basically people searching for your products and your services, but not your brand. Well, no brainer, right? But how can you actually know what's out there? All right, because as I said, like especially when it comes to the long tail, which is like 50 to 70% of the non-brand searches, it's very murky out there. Like you actually don't get a lot of good numbers. Here again, you can use our tool, but you can also do this manually. I'm going to quickly explain you how to do this manual. Here are the search terms where we actually realize Google's monthly like search volume in Google keyword tool is 0. But the funny thing is, like, even on exact match, you get a lot of sessions from paid search. How does that work? All right. And then you have all this massive revenue. So the most underutilized SEO tool is your paid search term reports. And what you do with them, you just look at the search terms, you look at non-brand, you have all the transactions, sessions, impressions if you want to, and you actually see your conversion rates. And then what you can then do, you can actually run them like those search terms through a rank tracker and see where are you ranking and where you're not, and what are you ranking with. Right? There's so much insights there. You can use this manually. Again, you can use tools. Yeah, once you know that, you actually then identify what are all your long tail, what's your long tail, and what you can go after, how to expand it. Because paid search already tells you have the product, people buy, people actually convert. That's the most important thing. This is not a theory. This is actually proven already. All right, so you can expand your brand and market share on organic if you then actually start looking at those terms and to expand. And you can expand by improving existing pages, and you can expand by creating new pages. So this is the theory, all right? So what can we do? I'm going to do this very quick. So just to summarize, and then we have time for questions. So first of all, like everything I've talked about, we do this at scale, right? Our system actually, so it's a landing page automation system, which works for organic, paid shopping, and paid social. But on the organic search side, we run 1 million pages on websites, right? Automated. There's 10 million products. Well, there's actually, those numbers is growing by the day. And then it was also important, there's 50 million links that we calculate. So those new pages have to be integrated with links. So that's integrated as well. And there's obviously new features, and you can measure the ROI of every page, right? So this is the new way, like, which it doesn't replace existing SEO, but when you do want to do things at scale, you can create thousands of new landing pages to match exact product searches at scale within, like, once it's set up, actually within seconds. They're all dynamically linked contextually, which is really important. Because they're easy to crawl, and you really, when you create a new page, you want to actually know where to link it from. But if you create a lot of pages, you can't put them all in your menus and change your information architecture. So you have to find another way, and that's what we've done. And of course, you don't want to rely on tech all the time. So even if you do this in-house, you want to think of ways like that tech does something once, and then they create a capability, and then you can actually use that. Right. So yeah, there's keywords, insights, everything I talked about. Not going to go too much into that, but it's also really fast. So this can be set up in 4 weeks. Whereas if you're replatforming, you want to create new capabilities on a website, replatforming, it takes an average 1.5 years to adapt a new platform. Right. Yeah, drive customer acquisition by attracting new converting users. Talked about that. And so this is how it looks, right? These are new pages. They match search results, but they match search results. They match search queries that are important, because you don't want to create 500,000 new pages just for the sake of it. That, well, even if nowadays Google might not penalize you because the algorithm is smart enough, you water down your domain authority and it just doesn't actually help. And where do you link them from, right? They might not even be indexed. So don't even think penalties. This is actually something else in SEO. Like, before penalties, there's like so many other mechanisms that something doesn't work. It doesn't have to be a penalty. So yeah, again, you don't want to just spam the index, because it's actually not good for your own website. And Google has, before penalties, like many other ways of avoiding that. But for the ones you want to target, like, very often there are lots of search terms where you create an amazing user experience that hasn't been there before in your website. And yeah, so in this case, what we also do is we target best keyword combinations. But when we do that, we actually have to reorder the exact matching products by ratings, right? Because otherwise, if you just have the same page and just put best in front, well, that's duplicate content, and it doesn't create any user benefit. Location-based triggers, like if you can add the shop locations if there's location searches, and all of these things, right? So lots of things we can do. Very flexible template. In our case, this is headless commerce. We actually don't rely on your CMS. It's actually sitting on our system and just uses your resources. I think our Google AMP, Google AMP, just Longtail UX in this case. Yeah, and then the links are really important, right? So there are really good ways how to internally link pages, new pages, without having to put them into the menu, making sure that they're not too far away from your main hub pages. Google crawls them, but actually they are also seen as contextually relevant, because that's really important that you link within contextual silos within your website. And that's what we do here as well. And of course, present the links in a way that the users see them and also may click them, because yeah, it's not just talking about SEO here, and Google looks at that too. Right, so 3 solutions that talked about that. We talked about organic today. Just really quickly, 2 last case studies and then I'm done. So this is really like the power. For this client, we actually vetted more than 1 million keywords, like that scale. Actually tested 100,000 keywords like live as pages, but because the system is so flexible, on a 3-month rolling basis, you can basically see if the keyword in the page works, ranks, and generates revenue. If it doesn't, you can basically just take it down and add another one, because there's always more keywords you want to target than pages you actually want to have. Right? Because as I said, you don't want to spam the index. So we're actually just talking 35,000 pages. It's a very big website, but massive growth and lots of revenue, and it's all measurable. Adevinta, probably known because they Adevinta Group, they bought eBay Classifieds. Here, massive uplift. We provide 42% of the total website new user growth for that website. That's Mexico, and yeah, as I said before, you can actually have a really big impact. And this is just in closing, these are numbers your CMO understands, your CFO and your CEO. And that's what I talked about in the beginning. Like, they understand total impact on their website. They understand ROI. Like, this is the language you want to use. And also, if you're happy in SEO, that's great. But I mean, over time, you maybe want to also look at other channels and maybe like, well, rising in the ranks and managing people and more channels. And the challenge with SEO is that we talk about, they're all very specific metrics we're using. We talk about rankings, we talk about keyword coverage, all these technical terms, but they don't actually overlap with other channels. Whereas all the other channels, what they have in common is they talk the same language and look at the same metrics. So I think it's really important to think about those metrics and like, how can you actually make SEO tangible using those metrics, new user growth, revenue, and really make it measurable. Anyway, so here's a recap. Measure brand versus non-brand. You can do this manually. There's actually an article you can also go to, or you can use the tool and then it's explained. Demonstrate ROI of SEO to your C-suite because, well, that's what they care about. And you can do this using Google Analytics non-brand SEO revenue analysis with the year-on-year trends. Even if you don't create new pages, you can just actually look at the year-on-year or uplifts with anything you've done on your website. And identify keywords that fill gaps in your architecture, and these you can measure directly. And finally, overcome SEO limitations, like when you compete or when you have to discuss with other areas of your business. Well, in terms of UX, when you create new pages, they're actually linked outside of your main website navigation. You can do that because when it comes to main website navigation, you might get a lot of pushback by your UX team. CMS and tech resources, yeah, I can't really offer you something else there because usually everything you do is actually linked to that. Even though if you have internal projects, as I said before, once you get tech resources, always think about how you can use them at scale. So not just for one thing, but that basically your tech team creates capabilities for you to reuse. And that's what Longtail UX is basically. It's a capability which is plugged into the website. And once it's there, you can use it and make changes on the website. Right. So scorecard, I mentioned that. Insights, I mentioned that. Thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Beautiful. And we have a couple questions in here, quite a few questions. So definitely want to just, reiterate if anybody has any questions, if you want to get more granular, if you're looking to understand more about what, Andreas, understands about the space or what, Longtail UX can help you solve, definitely throw those questions in here and we will get to them. I did want to, make a comment, which I think is, it's really great. And I'm really happy that we've gotten to a point where some of these tools are more written by people who understand search, and these services and these companies are coming together from people who truly understand search. A lot of times, the page creation, a lot of times these type of services are very much from a developer standpoint. And they don't always work in SEO. They don't always work in Google. And I've run into so many issues with sites that were written in like, custom JavaScript, and they've spent, $500,000. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not readable because like you didn't even use like standardized, Java. And so it's a blank page to search. So I think it's really good to kind of see, a solution like this written by somebody who, has experience in search and has experience in multiple different companies and understands the hardships that come from that. So kudos for that. And then diving into some quick questions in here. Right off the bat, I had one in here that was kind of responding from some of the things you were talking about with the scorecard. And they were asking, with the search query report potentially going away from paid search, how will that affect your scorecard?
That's a good question. I mean, so when we started, like the first concepts of this specific software, so I've been working with that concept like since 2008, but the actual software as a service we started like the first concept in 2012, and that was actually the year where keywords disappeared from organic, right? So you only have to do a poll before you actually had all of the search terms. There was a time you can even read out the keyword or the search term from your referral URL. I mean, you can do so much on that. I have no idea where Google does that. I mean, I can guess. I don't expect search term report to go completely away from paid search because they're used too much still. Google tries to get more into dynamic search and put more into automation and to not rely too much on users, on humans. But I don't think it's going away. What you have to see is the fact that Google now has removed like all the super long tail of the search terms. That actually frees a lot of disk space for them. Like you actually have like 20% of the traffic, if you remove those search terms, that is like 80–90% of your, I mean, how many, if you think in Excel, like how many rows is that, right? So, and they don't provide that much. So I actually don't expect that to go away. We might have to deal with like a smaller proportion, same as in organic. But we can, there's statistical analysis you can use.
Beautiful. So a follow-up to that from the same individual asking question is that they factor in that they consider direct traffic to be kind of a dumping ground of SEO that comes through HTTP, right? How do you accurately calculate goal per completion for local businesses? Is there a formula to calculate this for different types of SEO, like local versus e-com, etc.? And does that include salaries?
So for first question, that's actually a really good point. When we look at landing page reports, we actually look at organic and direct, both channels, because what we see is that 15 to 20% of organic search is actually reported under direct, which again is insane. We're talking Google not understanding where Google comes from. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about Google traffic, and their own Google Analytics tool picks up organic as direct, like in so many cases. 15–20% is a high percentage. We know that because our URLs are quite complex. It's long tail search. People don't type this into their browser. Like that's in anyway. So you actually, when you do landing page reports, and when you look at those really specific longer URLs, you actually want to look at organic and direct together, because that's most likely is actually both organic. That was the first question. The other one, in terms of like for local, I really have to say we don't do local SEO, and it's just like we deal with local search queries, because lots of our customers they have stores, like store networks, but we don't do local SEO, so I can't really answer that there. I could give you something, but I'm not an expert, and if I'm not an expert, I prefer to. There's lots of good articles, I'm pretty sure, on search engine journals. Sorry for that.
Yep, understood. I'm also not much of a local person, so unfortunately I can't throw in another kind of answer to that. Question: when we were talking about branded versus non-branded search terms, is this a feature that Longtail UX has that separates those?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so in our reporting, we separate it out. We also report on the uplift, or first of all, the baseline of customers, and then on the uplift. The actual technology we do, we only target non-brand keywords, right? We would never have any URLs targeting brand searches. So yeah, we separate that. We completely. For me, again, like if I was to do reporting and channel reporting, the brand search for me is direct. It's the same thing. Like brand search and direct should be in one bucket, and organic search generic keywords should be another bucket, and then also the proportion of direct, which is unfortunately not reported on organic. That's how you get the most accurate budget decisions in your business. Just put brand. Brand is not search for me.
Beautiful. What are some, look, this is definitely something that's an undertaking when you start talking about producing a lot of pages and you start, looking at, kind of making these kind of big shifts or big changes in the fundamentals of how you produce content or produce pages. You've been doing this a long time. What should somebody be thinking about when they're going into this undertaking? What is some of the prep work? What should they be considering? What should they be putting together in their strategy? What kind of things data wise should they be putting together to be as successful as possible? Primarily in general, but also with Longtail UX, like specifically your brand. What do people need to come prepared for?
Well, it's the same thing whether you do it with us and we guide you, or whether you do it yourself. So first of all, whatever you do, before you start, you should establish your baseline. Like, where do you start? And then because if you measure success later, if you don't know your baseline, like you can't measure success, right? Like where do I come from? So whatever you do, have a look at two things. Well, first of all, brand versus non-brand, how's it currently looking? Look at conversion rates, which can tell you what you can expect as well. And then also look at, like, especially for SEO, look at paid search. If you spend millions of dollars, it's literally your colleagues spend millions of dollars in keyword research for you. Just use it. And then you look at the gaps. The next thing is, if you want to create new pages, you want to understand, like, well, do keyword research. Yeah, your search term reports are still, I think, the most valuable thing. Of course, you have to then also do keyword competition analysis, just if there's a search you can actually get anywhere. The next question is, do you have content? All right. So actually, if we put those search terms maybe into your internal site search, which may or may not work really great, but do you actually have existing products? Do you have on your blog? What's your content you already have? And then what I always say is, you don't actually have to recreate content often. It's just, there is content on your website. It's just sitting in different silos. And if you can create a new page with an amazing user experience by just actually taking the existing content from different silos, and that's pretty much what our our technology does at scale. Like, it provides you a user experience for this search term, getting all the related products, the exact matching ones and related, gives you whatever else you have, like articles, stores, like anything, and basically create like a mini hub page for this specific. It's like a curated content for this search term, but from existing content. So you don't have to always recreate. I think that's important.
You know, one of the other comments I really wanted to throw out there is that I think a lot of times as companies, we tend to look at keywords from what we think people should utilize in looking for our product. And so I just want to remind everybody out there that sometimes when you're looking through these reports, you tend to disregard some of the phraseology or some of, I don't know if that's a word or not, but the different parts of how people are trying to say this. But I think it's important to really pay attention to that, because one of the beautiful things in the back in the day with Delicious was it was a way to determine how people were talking about your product in their own words. Well, you have that data now. It's might not be your first thing you see, but it's available and you can track it and you can start to figure out what are people searching for on your site, or what are the people searching for in general in your space, and really trying to think about what words your customers really are searching for can help a lot. So just definitely wanted to throw that comment in.
Yeah, on that, really, very good point. Thinking about, like, what does your CMO care about, what they should look, what do you have to offer to them? It's exactly that. You can actually offer them, here's a focus group of millions, and this is how they search for our products and then convert or not, right? So you can actually, like, could have like a monthly, whatever, like a last month, these were the top searches, and this is also the stuff we don't actually have content for, and we should be thinking about. Right? Everyone looks for whatever reviews. If you don't have enough reviews on the website, here's your next project. Yeah, exactly.
You
Great
mentioned
point.
CMOs, and so I wanted to bring up a question
Yeah,
about selling, right? One of the challenges is
yeah,
getting buy-in for these projects, right?
yeah,
And so it's also kind of a known thing. I don't know how much you've experienced this, but I've experienced it and heard it a lot, is that, there's a different answer when you ask somebody what is your expected ROI from this project and what they really are expecting as an ROI from this project, right? So when it comes down to something where people are saying, like, I care about conversions, but then they really only get excited when they see a lot more traffic coming in. Is there a way to kind of have certain conversations with different departments? Is there a way to really discern what is going to make your executive team actually happy?
yeah. I think that is also a very good question, and I can actually tell you, we as a company, we learned this the hard way too. So you have to understand your audience, and you have to actually speak the language of your audience. If you talk to the CMO, you have to actually understand, what do they care about, what are the metrics they track, and what do they actually want. Right? It's like a is the what is, like, a Morningstar, isn't what's the series on Netflix? What is it you really desire? Like, that's actually what you want to, that's what you need to know. Like, once you know that, you can then actually address that. There's no, and because it's hard enough, like, SEO is a very, very foreign concept for many people. So what you're asking them to sign off on and to do is already hard to get their head around. But then at least give them metrics and things you can track that they understand. Right? I think
Yeah,
this is the
one
most important thing.
One of the things we used to do, and I still do to this day, is that I try to avoid having this quote unquote SEO meeting where all the execs come in together, and then you're trying to have this discussion to three different people that have three different, really goals, and you find people kind of challenging you a
Yeah,
lot because they don't, So one of the things you can also do is just really focus on getting, marketing meeting, right? Joining a marketing meeting or joining a tech meeting or joining somebody else's meeting in order to bring in knowledge of your efforts in SEO can also help to really focus that messaging. So just another thought comment to throw out there.
yeah,
Um, One more, I think this one will be a fun one, and I kind of want to end on this point with you is that, like, look, there's a lot of people that have been in marketing, for a while, but there's a small group of people that have been in marketing over a decade, right? And, some of us have been doing this a really long time. And so it gives you a sense of a perspective on, what are the, links are gone, 10 years ago. They're never going to exist. Websites are gone. Voice
yeah,
search is the future. Like there's so many like very data-based predictions that just they take longer. There's something that doesn't implement the adaption doesn't occur in the same way that people expect it to, and it can morph and change and evolve. Projecting forward, 2021 is going to be a very interesting year with a lot of challenges. What are you seeing in 2021 that you're kind of interested in or excited about from marketing, in digital marketing? And let's kind of, I guess, say from the SEO slash, Longtail UX thing, where are you seeing the future over the next couple years, and where should we start kind of paying attention a little bit?
yeah. I mean, just on your comment, I mean, the oil was gone in the 70s, right? I mean, there's just all these predictions.
Yeah,
So what's in 2021? So, well, let's just look at the situation we're currently in, right? I mean, we're terrible. There's a terrible pandemic. It changes everyone's lives. So I should have started actually this whole thing. I hope everyone's healthy and safe. So this is a fact, right? It's not going to go away. But what it has done, like we're here actually, we are in a like from a job perspective, we're in a very privileged situation, right? Because we're working in online, and there's a massive shift to online. And basically we have leapfrogged like in that sense 5 years into the future. So online is so much more important now, and search channel is still very, very important. Like it's like the boring old thing. It's been around for 20 years. Like everyone talks about social and all the other stuff. But it's still, as you see, like we just had the poll, like 70% of your website traffic, and really like for every like it's more than 50% of revenue, last click attributed at least, comes from search. So we are in a massive growth industry still. And I think this is and everyone's attention that goes more now to digital has been this year, and it's going to continue next year. And even companies who are not e-commerce or online only, but they're like bricks and clicks, online becomes so important. So it's becoming all. But what also happens is, of course, budgets. Like people are not on the spending spree next year. I can tell you that. So budgets are scarce, and you have to compete for budgets. But everyone is looking for how can I recover everything I've lost on the well, like the non-digital side, like in bricks, and recover in clicks. And SEO, of course, is one of the biggest channels. So I think next year is going to be so important when you work in SEO to actually put this into a broader perspective. SEO, PPC, paid social, in the end is about new customer acquisition, right? So you have to put this into the bigger perspective. So it's a massive opportunity next year. People
yeah,
move more online, but I think it's really now time to come out of your bubble, for us all to come out of the SEO bubble and to actually think about it's one channel. It's just
yeah.
the economics are the same actually, right? We just pretend they're not. It's just the systems how to get there is different, and
It's
that's why
really
they need
interesting.
specialists. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well, just to kind of add to that comment, if you don't mind. I would say that, the shiny object syndrome is kind of over. Where, there was a lot of new
Yeah,
things over the last couple of years, and a lot of those things never really had return. There was, we talk about this internally a lot. We're like, oh, there was the everything's video, right? Facebook was like, you got to go video. Everybody's like, you got to go video.
yeah,
Companies went out and spent massive budgets, raised money, built studios, built video, and then video didn't really do it right, for
mm,
everybody, at that time period. And so a lot of people had layoffs, and it actually caused companies to, go under just because they couldn't handle, the losses that they had from video when they weren't
yeah,
able to have the type of success that they wanted that day. So I do think that like a lot of those kind of like, let's just do it for the sake of doing it is kind of gone. Now people
yeah,
really want that data. They really want something that works. You're not going to just convince your bosses to drop $100,000 on a whim for an experiment anymore. They want to know what that return is, and I think that's what 2021 is going to be about. 2021 is going to be about ROI, a lot
yeah,
stronger.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think if you work in SEO, and I think next year also going to be, well, everyone has to think about job security as well, right? But I think
Hmm.
as an SEO specialist working in SEO, you're so uniquely positioned to actually have more of it. Think about like what's your ideal like for managers, right? It's like this T-shape. You're broad, you understand all channels, and you go deep in one. Right? You are deep in SEO, you understand that, and people from outside, it's going to be hard to understand it. Going broad is actually much easier for you. You just have to understand the other metrics, how the other channels work in
Hmm.
general. Whereas other people coming from paid or coming from other areas to actually also cover SEO is much harder for them. So you're actually uniquely positioned when you work in SEO. You just have to get your head above this, like out of your bubble, and just think a little bit. How do the other channels think, and how do they, not how do they technically work, but what do they care about, and how are budgets actually managed?
Yeah, I
And,
also
and then
think
when you apply that to SEO, like it's a super powerful position.
yeah, that's a great ending point. Great point to kind of run forward on. Andreas, we've run out of time, but I mean this was
Yeah,
a lot of really great information. It was very specific, which I think everybody really appreciated, because this is one of those discussions where I think it's really tough for people to wrap their head around. We like the idea of automation, but to really get into it and do it right is scary, right? So much can go wrong, and I think that you sharing not only your information but also your product and the understanding of kind of where it fits in the current scope of digital marketing today and tomorrow, I think is really timely and important. So I hope everybody got value from it like I did. I hope that you enjoyed speaking about it. I appreciate you giving us your insight and your time. Thank you very much.
well, thank you, Brandon. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you again very soon.